Hi there, my name is McCarty. I'm a local foods and small farms extension educator with the University of Illinois Extension, serving Daviess, Stephenson, and Winnebago counties. This week on Get Growing, we're talking about container vegetable gardening. Choosing the right container, choosing the right vegetable to grow in that container, and choosing the right container mix to grow those vegetables in. Most of the time, a 1-gallon pot is going to be the minimum to grow vegetables in. This is what you see here. This is a 1-gallon container. And as you think of how much you could actually grow in this container, sometimes you're really just looking at one plant. If you were growing carrots, if you were growing spinach, some of those loose leaf lettuces, you may be able to actually grow a lot in this 1-gallon container. When you compare that to a 2-gallon container, it now gives you a lot more height as well as a little bit more depth to that container that you're going to be growing your vegetables in. In this type of container, you may be able to plant a patio type of tomato, a single cauliflower, a single broccoli plant, or even a single kind of cucumber plant, which is what I'm growing this season. One of the other containers I'm growing in this season is actually a fabric bag. And you can see the fabric bag here has handles on both sides, which is something I really like because I can move it around my garden. One of the other benefits with these types of bags is that they have a lot of capacity. So this is actually a 10-gallon fabric bag. And you compare that to the 2-gallon container that typically you would be growing most vegetables in. And what this means is that if you're using this type of container, you could be growing a plant like Blue Hubbard, heirloom tomatoes, potatoes, and some of those other plants that really wouldn't fit in well when it comes to growing in a 1 or 2-gallon container. Container vegetable gardening allows you to reuse some of those containers that you may already have. This past spring I planted knockout roses, and some of my knockout roses came in a 2-gallon pot, which you see here, and a 1-gallon pot, which you see here. The benefit here was that as I thought of growing cucumbers this season, I wanted to experiment and see how they would do in containers. So Muncher is a standard cucumber that is growing in this pot here of 2 gallons. And then I have sour gherkin, a very small cucumber that's growing in this 1-gallon container. The benefit with container vegetable gardening then is that it can allow me to experiment and see what works and maybe what doesn't really work this year. I may find that as the season goes along, this is working really well for sour gherkin, or it may mean that next year I really need to grow sour gherkin in a 2-gallon container. Once you've decided on a container, as well as the vegetables that you're going to grow in them, you need 2 additional things. You need to get a potting mix or a container mix. And the reason for these is that this mixture, which is usually soilless based, allows for good aeration as well as drainage of your container. You wouldn't be digging up the soil and placing it in here because it may have some issues when it comes to drainage. The other thing you have to recognize is that these mixtures have very low nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and those other soil nutrients that my vegetables really need. So I'm going to combine this with a fertilizer. And usually a liquid fertilizer is a better step and a better process to use in a container. You also want to look towards one that might be applied on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. As there's so much drainage in this container, it will lose quite a bit of those nutrients that the liquid fertilizer has added. When you combine all of these, the right container, the right vegetable, choosing a container or a potting mix to grow in, and that fertilizer, you should be on a pretty good path when it comes to having a successful experience growing vegetables in containers. So that's this week on Get Growing. Remember, you may need to water your containers every single day, depending on the growth of the plant as well as the weather that we're encountering that day. You may also need to add additional fertilizer, much more than that weekly or bi-weekly fertilizer that we would typically recommend. And think about taking notes and photos of how your vegetables are adapting to those containers. This may really help you this season as well as next year to figure out what works and what doesn't work when it comes to container vegetable gardening. For more information on resources and upcoming events, please visit extension.illinois.edu/JSW or follow us on Facebook at Northwest Illinois Local Foods.